So I've been a criminal defense attorney in the Fort Collins, Larimer County area for the last 10 years. I started my own practice in 2005, and I've specialized pretty much in domestic violence and sex offense cases, and I've practiced mostly in Larimer and Weld County for the last 10 years.
You spoke at the Loveland City Council meeting about Detective Brian Koopman. When did you first learn that Detective Koopman was under investigation for lying?
Pretty much a couple weeks before that. I had been informed by Troy Crenning, who's on the City Council, that he had been notified by the Public Defender's Office that Detective Koopman was under investigation. And I believe Troy knew before that because he's a council member, and there had been money that was obviously spent on the defense of Mr. Koopman. However, I did not become aware of it until the Public Defender's Office had notified Mr. Crenning of that issue.
So the public defender never notified you directly that Detective Brian Koopman was under investigation for lying?
No, I heard it through Troy Crenning is where I first heard it.
And that was just in May or June of 2015?
That's correct. It was probably the end of April, beginning of May, when I found out about that, and I was pretty irritated for the simple fact that I had had a couple cases with him, and that information was never disclosed through a Brady letter from the District Attorney's Office.
So Detective Koopman has testified directly against some of your clients while he was under investigation for lying?
That is absolutely correct.
What are some of the legal and or ethical consequences of those actions?
Well, I typically don't involve myself in actions that, involve suing the government or anything of that nature. So I've had my clients reach out to other lawyers who are involved in that type of legal work. I believe that this was a Brady violation and it should have been disclosed. In the past, when I've represented officers who've been accused of criminal accusations, a Brady letter gets sent out right away, and that did not happen in our case. And clearly Detective Koopman is being sued by the Myers family as a result of this sugar fiasco here in Larimer County, and that has happened since he's testified in 2 of my cases, and that was never disclosed. And so it's either a police department issue that it should have been disclosed, or it's a district attorney's issue that it should have been disclosed. So someone's at fault.
So you talked about the Brady letter. Is that the same as a Rule 16 requirement?
Correct.
So for people who don't understand what a Rule 16 is, can you just briefly explain that?
Sure. Under the Rules of Criminal Procedure, we have what is called Rule 16, and it's for information that is supposed to be disclosed to both parties. So the defense has an obligation to turn over certain information, or the district attorney's office has the ability to request that information, and then the judge decides if it has to be turned over, as well as the district attorney has an obligation to turn over information. And in the Masters case, the Court of Appeals basically said whatever in the custody of the police department is automatically in the custody of the district attorney's office, and so therefore that information should have been turned over, and it wasn't.
What are some possible legal defenses that the district attorney could use that would allow the DA not to disclose the fact that a detective who was testifying under oath was also being investigated for lying?
Well, if there's something currently going on, like what's going on potentially with the grand jury indictment, they don't necessarily have to disclose that because he hasn't been indicted yet. However, in this case, he is being sued, and he's being sued because he apparently falsified information. And based on the deposition that's been shown on the TV, it's clear that what he has stated in the deposition is different than what was in the arrest warrant affidavit. Now, whether or not he's actually found liable or not, it's still something that should have been disclosed. Again, in the cases that I've had that have involved police officers, even the mere accusation, it had to have been disclosed because criminal charges were filed. Ultimately, my case was dismissed. We still don't get the Brady letter disappeared. That will follow her until she is no longer a police officer. However, that was never disclosed to us. We've never received anything, even to this day. There's not been anything. And the district attorney's office always has an ongoing obligation to continue to turn over information. So let's just say 10 years from now they get some sort of a police report or photographs. It has to be turned over, even if the case is done and over with. And still to this day, I've never received anything.
What motivates you to speak publicly about this issue?
Just because I'm frustrated. I mean, clearly this country is going through a huge upheaval with cops and things of that nature. And I'm absolutely about the Constitution and that you remain innocent until proven guilty. Unfortunately, that's not the reality, even though that's what the Constitution says. My clients are typically guilty until I prove them innocent. And so I'm all about Detective Koopman having the same rights afforded to all my other clients. However, it doesn't seem that that's how that's shaking out. It's clearly, to me, appearing as favoritism. We represented Jeremy Yachik. The Berthoud Police Department got shut down as a result of Detective Koopman's investigation of that. And Jeremy was not afforded the same rights as Detective Koopman is clearly getting in this case. So it's very frustrating, and I want justice to be upheld. It's being eroded daily. The Constitution is disappearing, and it seems that we're playing favorites. And again, when I have clients that have been involved where he's been involved and they've said, look, he's lying, and you have nothing to refute what he is saying on a witness stand or to go after his credibility, it's very difficult because prosecution will use anything against your witnesses to refute their credibility, and that's my job as a defense attorney as well, is to get any piece of information that I can to possibly refute their testimony, and that is a huge piece of information that could have possibly refuted his testimony in my cases.
You mentioned the Berthoud Police Department was shut down directly as a result of Detective Koopman. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, obviously he investigated our client for child abuse, and as a result of that, the Berthoud Police Department got shut down because the Berthoud Police Department believed they investigated the case and they believed that there wasn't criminal charges that should be filed, as well as there was other investigations done by the Department of Human Services, both in Larimer and Weld County, and no charges were brought. And it wasn't until Detective Koopman got involved that all of a sudden now criminal charges were being involved. And, then everybody got investigated. And then before you know it, the police department got shut down. So something doesn't pass the smell test for me on that.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I hope that the city council does something. I feel so many times that when the citizens come here and complain about what's going on in our community, it falls on deaf ears. I feel that the mayor and other people cut me off the minute my 3 minutes came up, yet other people got to speak as long as they wanted. And clearly it appears that there's favoritism. There was minimal questions that were asked by the city council. In fact, Councilman McKean and I believe Councilman Clark were the only two council people that even asked anything of the city manager or the city attorney. The rest of the people kept quiet on the council, and I don't believe anything's been done since then. Based on our conversation, I believe you've said there's been, 2,000 and some emails that have come across the city council's email. Clearly, the people of Loveland are not happy with what's going on. And I believe that it's being hushed and no one wants to talk about it. And I think that happens a lot. The city people come here and complain about what's going on, and it falls on deaf ears and they do exactly what they want to do. Or you complain about it one time and then people forget about it and it never gets brought up again. And it's very frustrating as a citizen of this community to see how the politicking is happening. That's not what their job is. They're not running for governor or another office in this state. They're here to take care of the citizens' concerns and follow through with what we want. We put them in office. And it's run no different than the United States Senate and House. They get in and they do exactly what they want, and what we have to say doesn't matter. And it's clear that the city is potentially going to spend more money on this, and I think that it seriously needs to be looked at and decide whether or not it can be resolved, and if it's not, what are we going to do to minimize the bleeding at this point in time? It needs to stop.
As a criminal defense attorney, what would you like to see happen specifically with Detective Koopman?
Well, as I stated when I was here at the city council, I want him to resign, and if nothing else, be put on administrative leave, I think at the minimum, until the investigation is completed and he's either been cleared or the civil case is over. This man is continuing to write search warrants, continuing to investigate cases, and continuing to put people in jail when he himself does not have a clear cloud over him. And if he's been accused not once but twice of potentially lying, and the last case is a murder case, that's hard. How do you look at somebody and say he's unbiased and that he's not looking to put another notch in his belt when he's got a cloud that's hanging over him? And so I would ask at a minimum that he resign, as well as I think the city council needs to clean up what's going on. This isn't the first officer that they've had problems with in Loveland, as well as this is not the first time that they've kept things hush-hush and nothing's come to the forefront until later or after the fact. And it just seems shady. It just seems shady.